The Thames River is the second longest river system in southwestern Ontario, flowing over 290 kilometers from its headwaters to its mouth and draining 5,825 square kilometers, larger than all of Prince Edward Island. First used by the Aboriginals for thousands of years, and then by European settlers, the river has seen drastic changes over its lifespan. But nowadays, in a modern society, it is practically forgotten. Changing that perception was one of the goals of a team of 4 adventurers who, as part of an online awareness campaign, decided to embark on an ambitious journey. The 4 novice and inexperienced paddlers, Mark, Siobhan, Steve, and Hayden, were going to try and paddle the entire Thames River to raise awareness. They had no idea what they were about to face. This is Traverse the Thames. The thought of trying to paddle 290 kilometers without practice was daunting, so the team enlisted the help of experienced kayaker Shelley Carr, who met them on the South Branch in Ingersoll for some training.
I haven't done this in over a decade, so it should be an interesting experience.
I think the toughest part is going to be actually getting into the water.
Yeah. I hope once I kind of figure it out, I'll really start to enjoy, going down, and maybe when it gets a little twisty and stuff like that.
I'm glad Shelley's here because she seems to know what she's doing, so I'm really happy we're having this training day because I'm just now realizing how much we definitely need it.
For this, you have to learn to center your balance better, and you need to learn to let the river take you and relax about that, because stiffening up actually makes it more likely for you to flip over. There's just things that you pick up as you kayak a lot that are helpful to newbies, and hopefully it just makes their trip easier for them.
Things didn't get off to a great start.
And he's down.
It's not as cold as I thought it was.
But after a quick wash and rinse cycle, the team reassembled on the water and were on their way.
The water's running at a nice, good pace, but not too fast, and it's just deep enough that we can have some fun out here.
Despite a few bumps along the way, the river was smooth and flowing, and their pleasant paddling left the team feeling confident and ready for launch all the way up in Mitchell.
We all, I think, felt pretty excited about what we were about to go and do, unknowing of what we were actually about to walk into.
So there was a lot of discussion. There was some chatter really about whether we were launching in the right location. There was seriously some worries about the water levels at the time in the area and how far we were actually going to make it down the river that day.
The first thing, the shore crew came out and said, have you seen the water levels here? And I went down and looked, and it was quite literally ankle deep.
Driving up here today, I was getting a little nervous, but now that I see the raging waters, I'm not too nervous.
I think that training day really gave us sort of a false sense of security about what we were about to walk into.
I was probably more concerned about getting tired. That was the physical aspect. We only had 2 hours on the training day, and we're going to be on the water for about 5 to 6 hours. So I was wondering how I would feel and how far I'd make it down the river each day.
I had no expectations of how it was going to go. It was just getting set up.
Really anywhere on the North Thames River, you probably need like between 5 and 10 cubic meters per second, not 0.6.
I thought, okay, it's low here, but I knew there was a creek about 100 meters up from our launch point that drained in. So I thought, okay, maybe it's just low here. You know, water will come in and we should be fine. That was probably one of the most naive moments I had myself.
Being such a dry year, I think that if you would have called me, I probably would have said, don't go paddling.
Unfazed by the low levels, the team pushed their kayaks into the water and set out on their journey. But the early paddling wasn't quite as pleasant as on their training day.
So I wouldn't say there's a lot of stuff that we could paddle, to be honest. It felt like we were outside the kayaks a lot more than we were inside them. And anytime we got in the kayaks, it was just for a brief period. And what was kind of, I guess, a little spirit crushing at the beginning was every time we got in the kayaks, you could already see up ahead where you would have to get back out again. So you would just be kind of going on, just kind of cruising along, being prepared for like, all right, I gotta get back out and drag this kayak. That was fun.
This is a beaver dam, too. They're freaking incredible. It's really only canoeable, especially up that far north, probably in April and May, and then maybe again in November.
Get through, look at that.
Even 3 or 4 hours in, I was still pretty positive. Didn't let myself get too down by the need to get out a lot. I think because I'm lighter, so I was really motoring when we had to get out and walk. I was really motoring, so I felt really confident and being ahead of everybody. I'm winning. Kayaking's really cool, especially in places that the water is deep enough, because you can get right up to the edge of things and see everything, and it's so quiet.
Unfortunately, the sections of good levels were far too short, and that 0.6 flow rate, well...
The stream gauge at that location has been there since the 50s and has gone through 25 or 30 different rating curves, they call them, that measure the sort of discharge versus the elevation of the water, and they've just in the process of getting some new numbers there, because I thought that seemed a little high, and so you were probably actually dealing not with 0.6, but more like 0.06, like basically no water.
I was holding on to hope still that things were going to get a bit better.
And it never really got better for the whole time. Yeah, it just got progressively worse, actually.
My attitude went from, oh, this is kind of an annoyance, to slowly, the more you would end up in the boat and then out of the boat, and then you'd paddle about 10 meters before you'd have to get out of the boat. That went from, oh, this is an annoyance, to just an increasing amount of frustration. So I started pulling the boat harder to get it over some rocks. And in that time, I did a strain of my right forearm. I didn't really know it at the time, and I didn't really acknowledge it.
The not knowing was the hardest part. And not knowing when you come around a bend if you're going to finally be able to kayak for 100 meters or not. It's kind of, you get your hopes up every little turn, and then it was a big letdown every turn. So it's very soul-crushing, very, very hard.
As the sun set on the river, it became clear they weren't going to meet their target distance, so a new goal was set. The Line 12 Bridge, just north of St. Mary's. But even then, they would need help from the locals in order to make camp together.
If we didn't meet those people, we wouldn't have had a fire, because we wouldn't have had the light to be able to get the wood and all that.
We were really kind of blessed that there was these people, just that two random strangers showed up in their backyard, and they were more than willing to just step out and help, just out of the goodness of their heart.
I have so much thanks for them. Hip hip. That's for you guys.
Not exactly the ideal start we wanted.
It was probably ranking top 10 most horrible days of my life.
Probably one of the most difficult experiences I've ever been through.
It was honestly like going to hell.
Definitely
could have used a couple more feet of water for the trip, but I mean, we've made it this far, so.
I felt a bit better in the morning, but I still had this kind of sick feeling that just not knowing if I could continue, and just kind of, I was gonna see how the day played out.
Steve got picked up by one of his friends so that he could actually go get the kayaks, if I remember correctly. Then we saw we couldn't really carry on down the river anymore because there was so much portaging we would have to do ahead of us. So to get back on schedule, we really just had to move forward, so we were gonna move the kayaks forward, and that was our plan.
My goal was I was like, I know personally I can't take walking 12 out of 14 kilometers in the day. For the end goal of getting 29 kilometers a day, it's just not gonna happen or whatnot if the river's like this. So my goal was to get my vehicle, pick up the kayaks, and actually drive them from point to point as required.
I was looking forward to the yacht club, but at this point it's sad, but I want to go home after the first day.
Their situation was about to get worse as Steve called with vehicle problems.
The reverse gear was broken, so I couldn't reverse, so the transmission was down. So I had no vehicle to get back out.
We either had the choice to make, after sitting on the shore for about 4 hours, waiting for a vehicle that was never going to come, to make a decision. Either we get back in the water or we find a way to get these kayaks on some kind of vehicle and move them forward. And fortunately, one of our shore crew guys had a Jeep, and we loaded him up 2 by 2 on his Jeep with bungee cords, drove real slow down some country roads until we ended up in St. Mary's.
The team arrived in St. Mary's and hit the water at Lions Park.
So from where we launched in St. Mary's, it was pretty good for a little bit.
And then getting in the water was really easy there. It was the perfect launch point.
In hindsight, we probably should have launched there on day 1, but you know, in hindsight, you do everything right.
We paddled for a little while, then we got towards the weir there, and then it was back to that low water, can't move situation.
St. Mary's Weir is that's a historic structure that's been there for probably 100 years. It doesn't really have a purpose other than, I guess it was probably just something that they would have put in there because they liked the way that it looked. And at one point, I think there was actually a mill there. It probably was holding water back that then they would channel through some sort of a sluice that would power a water-powered mill. And so now we live with the legacy of those sorts of things. And they're really not great for the river because it holds water back and it prevents fish from getting upstream, etc.
So Mark decided to keep moving forward, but Siobhan and I pulled out of the water. Personally, her and I thought it was just too risky to keep going.
I got up right beside the weir. It was only a couple inches off to my left when I was paddling alongside it, and you could see the drop. And I decided I was going to go over the weir. I was going to take the boat, I was going to pull it over, and I was going to see what the conditions were on the other side.
It was kind of funny watching Mark do it, but at the same time we were all a little concerned because at this point he was definitely on a mission and there was no talking him out of it.
So I got the boat up, I pulled it to the side and brought it down over the weir, and I was feeling really determined. I was on a mission, I was making progress.
Seemed like it was exhausting getting over the weir, like more trouble than it was worth. And then like from where we could see, under the bridge at St. Mary's, it was just like flat rocks.
I was like cheering myself on, and I would wave to Siobhan and Hayden and the shore crew on the other side, saying like, yeah, see, you can do this. It is possible to do this. And I went about 10 feet and stopped, but I managed to kind of shuffle my way down to these bits where I could actually paddle a little.
After a short paddle through St. Mary's, Mark and the team went downstream and met with avid paddler Chris Johnston.
I've been paddling the Thames for several years. This winter we've kind of started doing the project, so the website launched and we've got the Facebook group and the YouTube channel. Several years ago, my buddy and I were trying to find more research to figure out where access points were and kind of how long it took to get from point A to point B, because to do a day trip, you don't know if it's going to take you 8 hours to get from one bridge to another or 45 minutes. So
yeah, we learned that the hard way.
Yeah, so everything changes so much in the Thames River watershed with rainstorms and whatnot. The upper Thames River has all these flow rates that you can actually go online and see what the live flow rates are. So if we can kind of correlate that to a trip log and give people an idea how long it takes to get from point A to point B and document it, that'll help people get out more often. We hope to bring maps and get the municipalities and some of the cities more involved with parking, increasing parking and whatnot.
Is that your hope, that the municipality like kind of, I guess, partners up?
If we can give this to the Upper Thames River and the Lower Thames River conservation authorities and the cities and municipalities to run with, then hopefully they'll make paddling more accessible for everybody.
Like, we learned a lot from Chris. I found him to be extremely knowledgeable.
The dams create reservoirs that cause problems with blue-green algae, but that going backwards is also started from phosphates from the farming and from city use on lawns and whatnot. The bald eagles and the osprey have come back because of the lack of use of DDT, so that's been a huge positive thing. Growing up 20 years ago when I was out fishing and canoeing on the Thames River, you didn't see any of that. It's one of those things where you got to treat the river right.
Do you recommend any good footwear for the river?
Yeah, paddling shoes. Sandals are not recommended.
Sandals are totally recommended.
So in certain flow rates, you do have to get out and walk more, especially up in the upper part of the Thames River watershed.
Yes, we found out.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally doable. I've been walking for 3 hours today, and my feet are a little worn out today, but I mean, they're not beat up and broken.
As our resident expert, what can we expect kind of going down the river from this point? Does it get better? Does it get worse?
From here to London, it slowly gets better. You're looking at getting out a couple hundred times between here and London, but once London, you get past the dam, get into some pretty fun water, some small rapids, but it gets pretty good for paddling. So that'd be a really good thing for you guys, because I can't believe you made it this far. So,
based on Chris's advice, the team once again loaded the kayaks on the vehicle, this time headed to the Thorndale Road Bridge. From there, they planned on making another attempt to paddle down the river.
Siobhan, you ready?
Getting in at Thorndale was super easy, and it was really, really, really beautiful there. The water was perfect there from then on until Fanshawe Lake.
From where we launched in Thorndale, it was much easier to paddle. We actually got to see the beauty of the river. That was an experience that kind of motivated me, like, oh, we can do this, this is going to work out, and that day one might not have been so bad. Day two also started off very rough, but it ended in kind of nicely, paddling across the Fanshawe Lake, seeing the sailboats. A couple of people actually met us part way on a boat, getting to see some real kind of forestry on the edge there of the lake, and saw some wildlife. Saw it was either of a huge raccoon or an abnormally large beaver, which we were kind of mistook for as a small bear at first.
And the sun was setting, and it felt like we were up north at some kind of cottage-like lake. But it was beautiful. Like it was nice. The water was nice and calm, and the sun came out, and there were sailboats everywhere. It was beautiful, but I hurt a lot.
Like, she was struggling, to be honest. She was having a really hard, tough go at it. The lake water is different than the river, in my opinion, because it's a lot stiller, so she has to use a lot of her arms more to kind of get her through. She really seemed like she wanted, like, part of her wanted to carry on, but she didn't think she was physically going to be able to keep going.
Just before the sun dropped, the team finally arrived at the yacht club. However, team morale was very low.
Hey, Mike. Good to see you again.
I'm Bob.
Mark, nice to meet you. This is Siobhan. She's one of our teammates.
Yeah, hello.
And that gentleman there is Hayden.
Hello. Hi. You're a brave bunch, you are.
Foolish, I think, is the way we feel right now.
Well, you're home for the night anyway.
All the men we met at the yacht club were really nice and really welcoming, and that was really nice to meet them.
I just called it a day of disaster. The first 2 days were disastrous for us because we were just fighting the river the whole time. So getting to the lake was like, I don't know, maybe that's the end of round 1. And now London's round 2, and then the rest of the river's round 3, 4, 5, and then maybe the knockout punch at the end.
And the news got worse, as at a team meeting, Siobhan and Steve decided to quit the journey.
I didn't want to leave, and I wanted to continue and be able to accomplish that and to be there for everybody and to finish what I started, because that's important to me.
And she just had to make kind of what the best decision would be for herself, which I think was the right decision for her, to be honest. Not to say anything about her like physical strength or is that for her own well-being. I think
it sucked having to stop, for sure. But I think like for me it was the best decision. I think I don't regret stopping, but I do feel guilty and I feel very sorry that I had to stop.
I think she made a smart decision at that time, and I'm not sure that I did, because I decided to continue going.
If you're not at the back, you don't realize how it is, because I'm a competitive person. I've been involved in athletics all the time. I didn't look at it as a competition, but when I see like a gap between where I should be getting bigger and bigger, but there's nothing I can do to control it, it was really difficult to watch. Like a lot of the times, even Hayden could go through things and I couldn't go through. It was really hard on the mental aspect of it, and to think that I would have had like 5 or 6 more days of that wasn't in the works for me. Yeah.
I think I kind of took them out of the decision-making process, which was a mistake. And I just kept kind of delegating things, saying, no, this is what we're going to do now. This is where we're going to go next. This is where we'll put in. I was really thinking about that I was willing to just sit and walk through the river the whole way if that's what it took. But I wasn't really considering their feelings and their thoughts about how we should operate as a team.
On the next episode of Traverse the Thames, the remaining 2 kayakers reach London, but low water levels have Mark facing the possibility of doing the rest of the journey alone.